Welcome to the December 10th Caribou City Council meeting. Tim DeRed is absent. Has anybody heard from Tim? Okay, could we please rise to the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there any public input? Anyone from the audience wish to address the council? Yes, please.
Excuse me. Is this on? Testing. Hi, I'm Sharon McGee. I'm from Caribou. I was in that fatal accident last month, a little over a month ago. And what I'm here for, I guess, is I wanted to address that the lighting in the city is poor, whatever lighting we do have. In some areas, there is no lighting at all. Sidewalks are not always cleaned appropriately. I mean, we've had this snow here, and we had it earlier than we should have. And there's people walking in the road, walking in the streets, and we don't see them, although they expect us to see them. And I feel that there's a lot of parts in town that it's just not lit up well. I've had, I don't know how many people come up to me after this accident that I've had and said, Sharon, you don't know how close I came to hitting someone the other night. I'm hearing this a lot. And now, of course, I'm noticing it even more now after this accident. I mean, it's scary. I don't even want to drive at night. It's going to take me a little while now. But I feel that something should be done. So that's my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Mr. Haney?
My name's Milo Haney, and I'm here tonight just to talk about on your agenda number 8, the letter C, discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 12-2-2018, supporting the construction of a new public safety facility for the police, fire, and EMS department of Caribou. You're going to be voting on that tonight to take it and do action on it. I would like to see it held off until the new council is seated, if possible, which is only 3 weeks away maybe, and let them decide how to vote, because they're the ones that are going to be more involved in the two that's going out. So I'd like to have you hold that off if it's possible and make the vote in 3 weeks from now. I talked with the manager today, and he kind of supported it with me, so I'd like to.
I'll bring it up to the council, and we'll let the council decide.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Don Owen. I'm the pastor at the Caribou Assembly of God Church at 116 Sweden Street. And my concern that I'm bringing to you tonight will seem a little trite from what we just heard earlier, but I believe we have a bird problem in Caribou. My church facility has been besieged for the last 3 years by pigeons, and we have done everything in our ability that we are aware of, but consulting experts, bird experts, so on and so forth, and we've tried electronic devices to scare them away, and all that does is irritate our neighbors. We've and there's a lot of gadgetry out there we're told we can attempt, but the bottom line, every expert that we've consulted says you must eliminate their food source. I don't know how we can do that, but I do believe we have a problem. I know that the Postal Service, the office here in town, has had issues with pigeons. One or two of our banks have had issues with pigeons, and they are a destructive bird, and they're a dirty bird. They, as you know, they just make a mess. And unfortunately, they perch at both entrances of our church building, front and rear, so people are tracking. It's coming into our facility. I don't know what a good answer is, but I did want to make sure you as a city council were aware of it, and perhaps somewhere in the not too distant future it might be addressed.
Do you have suggestions? I mean, you've spoken to bird experts. I don't think there's one sitting here.
Like I said, every one of them said, well, you can purchase some of our devices, and we have tried that. And they said some of them might be successful, others they may not. But all of them said,
All of them have something to sell?
yes.
Okay, maybe you could speak with the main warden service, or
Well, we have spoken to someone here in Woodland who is an expert on birds, and he has echoed the same, it's the same response. You must eliminate their food
so
source.
what are they eating? I mean, you said,
Well, we've got people feeding birds.
so your solution would be to have an ordinance maybe that we can't feed birds?
Possible.
I mean,
I've had conversation with the city manager last week, and he brought some very good points to that discussion. There's people who like to feed the ducks at Collins Pond. There's people who like to feed hummingbirds. So, I don't know how you're going to address one species of bird, but this is a problem bird, and I don't know.
we can't shoot firearms within city limits.
That's right, or we'd be doing it, but
Well, manager knows about it. If anybody has suggestions, we're open to it. I'd listen to the people that don't have anything to sell, and
yeah. Well, like I said, and those are the ones who are saying, eliminate the food source.
maybe we could talk to people that have more pigeons.
Well, you get to the cities, they bring peregrine falcons in and use, predator birds to eliminate them.
Oh, there you go. Are they expensive?
I don't know. I do know. I came out of my study one day and I looked up and they were scattering, and I thought, well, I didn't do anything to scare them, but I looked up and there was an eagle soaring overhead, and that scared them off. So there are devices that will imitate predator birds and things like that, but the one electronic device we've tried that screams out predator calls and distress calls from birds that are being attacked, all that did was annoy our neighbors, and so we had to stop. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the council?
My name is Wilfred Martin. I want to go back to number 8, such as Milo did, and under section C, the discussion and possible action regarding resolution 12-2-218 supporting the construction of a new public safety facility and police department. I would hope that you would stall any voting on any of this until after the new council is in. Now, I wouldn't have no grievance against discussing it, because there are a few things that I would like to see discussed on it. But that's up to you people, whatever you want to do. But please do not vote on anything tonight on that. And because you skipped an item in here that's going to affect some people on the council, okay? If you pass it.
Anyone else? Okay, declaration of possible conflicts of interest.
Could I say something to the lady about the lighting?
Sure.
I wanted to mention that a couple meetings ago, we're looking at these new lights that are gonna go in. And there's a question of how many we can buy, how many we wanna buy, and there was I'm not sure, I think Mr. Martin said about buying them all at once and getting this town lit back up. It's in the discussion stage, and in government, it takes a long time to move, but it is being worked on.
Yeah, it needs to be because.
And I personally would like to tell you that I believe in a lot of little lights instead of one big light, you know, and so we're looking at turning some of these lights back on. It'd be my preference, because there is a savings, and we can pass that savings into making our town look brighter again.
To make it brighter and safer.
That's right, and we all get that.
I do have something to say too. I was told by someone from the Public Works, I won't say who, but they said that that they could have had a grant. The city of Caribou could have had a grant for the LED lights, and paperwork was not put in time. And I'm just wondering if that's true or not.
I personally have no knowledge of it. Manager?
Not familiar with the grants that might be talked about there. I know we've been in this process of looking at the LED lights now since before I came here, early 2017, and it's something that not only Caribou's looking at, but many of the surrounding communities as well are all looking to cooperatively go into purchasing street lights and changing the LED lights.
Okay, well, this was just somebody that was a major person in the Public Works, and they said that the paperwork wasn't put in time to get LED lights.
If you have a question of that nature, this is the person to speak
Okay,
to.
well, no, I was just kind of curious if that was true or not. Okay, thank you.
And as far as the birds go, I feel bad for you. On the farm, I was blessed with two grandsons with a 20 and a 22, and it took care of all the problems. They are a filthy bird, so like Mr. Martin, I'm willing to listen to anything anyone's got to say about it.
There are health concerns also.
Absolutely. Yes, there are.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. November 2018 financials, minutes from a council meeting of October 17, November 13, November 20, and November 26. Renewal of IT services contract with Oak Leaf Systems, and approval of quitclaim deeds for properties which had lien waivers.
Clarify item G, the quitclaim deeds. Can we change that from lien waiver to foreclosure waiver so there won't be any?
That was an appropriate correction, yes.
Okay, thank you. All set.
Whatever wishes of the council.
Move the slate.
Second.
All those in favor? Yes. Bid openings, awards, and appointments. Mr. McDonough is leaving us after this meeting unless we have a special meeting. And we have a little token of appreciation for you here, Phil, from the city. And we thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. I'm not leaving town though, so don't worry.
Okay, item number 7, we have no public hearings. Number 8, A, discussion and possible action regarding abatement of property taxes.
Mayor and council, I'll defer to our financial officer for that.
We had a couple of personal property accounts from 2010 and 2011 that are been worked for the last 7 years and deemed uncollectible. We also want to consider taking off $22,000 off of the tax acquired property from the Bird's Eye.
Is the statute of limitation 5 years on personal property tax?
6 years.
6? Thank you.
Discussion? This would be 3 items for a total of 23 plus thousand. What are the wishes of the council?
Move to approve.
Second?
Further discussion? All those in favor? Passed.
Thank you.
8B, discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 1201-218, authorizing the cleanup of outstanding account balances with unencumbered appropriations before year end. Manager?
Mayor and council, the city's charter allows us to make minor budget adjustments within the budget, meaning that if we're not adding to it. For instance, the city manager can authorize department heads to move money around within their departments. But in the case of moving money from one department to another, or in the case of what's before you tonight, a cleanup of accounts, the city council has to approve that by resolution. And so the resolution that's before you tonight will help clean up 3 accounts. 2 of them are accounts in the recreation department. One a program that we haven't been utilizing for many years, and the second was for playground equipment. We believe that there was a fundraiser at one point to purchase some playground equipment in the early 90s, and they spent that fund. It was overspent a little bit, but we haven't used that account since, and so we're just trying to clean up the 100 or the $500 or so that are there. And the other one is $15,000 that was overspent when we repaired the Grimes Mill Road a couple of years ago. There was over expenditures on the engineering and the construction of that project, and so the hope is that we can clean up these accounts this year. They've been the recreation accounts have been in that situation now for many years, and we're just hoping to get them all cleaned up and zeroed out.
And where's the money coming from? Which account?
What we
General
would
fund?
what we would anticipate is the general fund balance.
Discussion?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Approved. Item 8C, discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 1202-218, supporting the construction of a new public safety facility for police, fire, and EMS departments of Caribou. So, manager, tell us what the committee has done, and then I'll ask the council what they want to do.
I have a presentation to kind of walk you through from beginning to end, if that's okay to go through that.
Sure.
And so the
Councilor-elects, if we decide to move this, pay attention. Thank you.
The council earlier this year asked that a citizens advisory committee be formed, and we held the first meeting on March 13th. The direction from the council was don't preclude anybody from being involved. If they wanted to go in and sit and participate, they could do that. The first meeting, there were 13 original citizens. What I mean by citizens in this case is that they didn't have ties directly to employment with the city, a city department or a city function. We had 6 more that participated over the course of the meetings. We also had our chief building official there, representation from our planning board. We had elected officials, multiple officials came on different times. And of course, the fire and police department representatives were there to help provide some additional information and feedback. We met 5 times since March. The last meeting was held just last week. On the city's website, we've posted all the information that was delivered during those meetings, and they also included 4 broadcasts to social media through Facebook, and those are still on the city's Facebook page. You can view those meetings. There was one that we just weren't able to get things working the right way, so it wasn't broadcast. But overall, very good participation. There was a lot of back and forth dialogue with the committee. You had those that I think came into the room initially that were just adamantly on each side, opposed or in favor, and I think that enabled a lot of good dialogue as to the pros and cons and the issues that were able to be vetted through the process. And the committee, when they first met, some of the first things they looked at were the facilities themselves. They were all encouraged to go through a tour of both the fire station and the police station and look at the situation there. We looked at, with both departments, what are the services they're currently providing. For instance, with the fire and the ambulance department, they provide services not only to Caribou, but to many of the surrounding communities. And even as you know, as a council, just recently, we added contracts for ambulance service into the communities of Washburn and Wade for next year. And so, again, looking at the services that are being provided, what are the trends that are happening with the fire and rescue calls? You can see since 1997, the trend is upward. We had 200, I believe it was around 240 calls a couple of years ago. Kind of peaking out a couple of years in a row, 2013 and 16. Ambulance call volumes significantly higher. We had a peak in roughly 2003 at 2,455 calls, and we're climbing up toward that again. We are expecting that the 2018 call volume will be higher than 2017, which is consistent with the trend that we're seeing. And of course, they looked at the space needs for the equipment, again, not only in the fire department, but in the police department. Here you're looking at pictures that I took inside the ambulance bays and illustrating the space constraints that they have in being able to park 2 ambulance tandem inside those bays. There's about an 18-inch gap, if that, between those 2 ambulances, and about 9 inches gap between the front of the ambulance and the garage door. And they have bumpers on the wall so that they can back the ambulance right up and put it right up against the wall in order to get those to fit. So just some of the space constraints that they looked at, as well as the future personnel, ADA requirements, equipment and space requirements that are being considered in the industry. And as I said, looking also at the police department and their calls volume that they're looking at, the number of complaints that continue to trend upward, and also other activities that they've been dropping since 2006. But we also have a lot of things happening with the police department as far as state mandated programs or requirements, drug issues, drug testing, and other things. And of course, just the space needs for all the gear that they have. So the committee, after going through, walking through the facilities and looking at some of these issues, was asked, for the police department, do they need better facilities? And the large majority said yes, they need better facilities. Do they need more space? Again, yes. Majority of the committee said yes, they need more space. They strongly agreed with that. Do they need a new police station? Again, most of the committee strongly agreed. There were some that were neutral on that one. When we asked the same questions about the fire station, it's much more mixed. You have, as far as do they need better facilities, you had 11 that agreed or strongly agreed, but you also had 6 that disagreed or strongly disagreed. Do they need more space? There was a little more consensus that yes, they probably needed more space. And then do they need new facilities? Again, it was spread out. You have 8 or 10 that were strongly agreeing to that, 7 that were disagreeing or strongly disagreeing. So you can see at the very start of this process, you have there generally was yes, the police department definitely needs something. The fire department was kind of on the fence as far as yes or no. And then we started looking at, well, if there's going to be any kind of new facility, either for a standalone police station or a combined fire or even just a fire station, where would something like that work? And so the committee made a list of sites that they wanted to investigate. We looked at 7 initially. We added an 8th one later on, which I'll get to. But we looked at, is there property around the hospital that something could get built on? What about land around the public works yard? What about 60 Access Highway that the city already owns? The understanding was that the Pines Health Center was looking to move out of their building. Could that be used for something? Of course, looking at the current fire and EMS site, was there enough ground on that site to do something? And we also looked at the armory, or not the armory, but the reserve buildings over on Sincock and York. Could we take that property and do something with it? And of course, the Bird's Eye property that the city was able to tax acquire. And so out of all of these, we recognized that there were options on each of those properties. We could maintain the police as is and maintain the fire as is on the existing property. Could we remodel the police station where it is and maintain the fire department where it's at? What if we built a new police station on a new location but left the fire station where it's at? Could we build a new police station at a new location and just expand the fire station on its property? What about expanding and remodeling the fire station to include both departments? And then the last one that we looked at was, what if we built a new public safety facility on a new location for both departments, so a combined facility? And went through a process of looking at direct impacts that could happen to the community, existing facilities, indirect impacts, strings or limitations from other government agencies, maybe based on past funding that we had or existing lease agreements that we have. Was there a potential of the new site becoming a landmark for the city, or even just the site constraints? And as we looked at that, the developable acreage, the zoning, the access, the utilities that were there environmental cleanup issues? What about response time differences between the sites, or even access from the priority areas such as the high schools, all of the schools really, the civic center, the CBD area. And then, of course, financial estimates. What would be the project costs for building those facilities on the different sites? And another one we looked at was just the useful life of whatever gets built. Going through an exercise of all of those criteria for all those properties, there was, I believe, a recognition that side by side, each property has its strengths and its weaknesses, and it really depended upon the building that was going to get constructed. We asked the committee to, in a sense, go through and weight or create a weighting factor on all of these characteristics and which ones were the most important things to be looking at with the sites. The 3 highest factors were, the highest one was the site characteristics themselves, in that did it have the access, the zoning, the ability to build things on it. And the second highest one, the financial estimate, and what really was going to be the cost to the city and to the citizens. And the third important one was the useful life. Was it something that was going to carry the city many years into the future, or was it more of a Band-Aid? And so taking those 3 as the main factors for consideration in the sites, we were able to weight the properties. And in the end, the committee determined that they did not want to continue looking at the National Guard site, nor the Pines property, nor the Public Works site, based on those site conditions or the constraints that were there. And then the committee said they wanted to continue looking at a combined facility onto a new site, and also looking at the option of just building a new police station, but expanding the fire station on the existing site. And so as we, I guess to bring up the committee also said right now they were only, based on that, they were going to be looking at the Birdseye site and a new site somewhere. And the committee wanted to hold out for a third site as a possibility. There was mention of maybe leaving the 60 access highway or the old Mecon building on the list, depending on what other information was available. But they also asked to find, is there a more ideal location for a standalone police station or a combined facility besides these properties? The city had a contract with Port City Architecture to help provide scenarios, and at this point we turned to Port City and asked them to help us pull some information together. And so they looked at these options. Again, a combined facility on the Birdseye site, a standalone police station on the Birdseye site, a standalone police station on the excess fire and EMS property at 111 High Street. Also, could we do a combined facility on the current fire and EMS site? And then we also looked at as what we thought was a real possibility was a standalone slab-on-grade police station over near the county offices where they already own some property, and some properties are for sale, and try to create some synergies and some shared use opportunities over there. So Port City put together again some designs. This is showing the combined facility on the Birdseye site. The Fort Fairfield Road and Highway 1 is being there. They're showing this somewhere close to the intersection. They also looking at what if we just built the police station and added on to it in the future when the fire department needs even more space. They looked at if you take the existing fire station on High Street and added on to it, added some more bays and refinished the inside to meet ADA and job safety and security requirements, and then maybe look at adding the police station as a standalone on the downhill side off of Water Street. Just a glimpse of what that might look like as far as adding bays facing out toward High Street in that scenario. Basically everything that's bays now would become office space or a living space. And then, of course, looking at the option of if we just expanded the current fire station to accommodate police and fire, and working with the site characteristics there. The last one that they looked at again was the police station close to the court building, and again looking to share parking facilities and try to keeping the police right downtown as much as possible. As far as cost estimates that Port City was able to pull together for us, the options ranged from $3 million for a standalone slab-on-grade police station to roughly $10.9 million for a new police department, as addition to the fire department. And the committee, after discussing the options, there was a vote, and there was a majority vote that the city not consider options C, D, or E, but they focus on the Birdseye site, doing a new police station with expandability, or a combined facility on Birdseye. There was also a vote that the city no longer consider the Mecon building for further consideration, and also the committee was pretty adamant that there needed to be a financial impact study done to better understand the impacts, looking at not only the cost for construction, but what would be the impacts to the city if we were to just maintain status quo or go with either of those options. So just a quick clarification, I know the committee asked for this as well. With the scenario of building both, or building one facility for both departments, the idea is that you would have 2 stories. The bottom floor would basically be a walkout garage or walkout basement garage with access visible from Highway 1. And there would be some shared bays, some facilities with that. The upper story from the Fort Fairfield side would look like the ground floor because of that walkout garage, but the departments would have shared space in between them for meeting space, training space, and some restrooms, locker space. I should take that back, not locker space, because of the equipment and the needs that they have. They would have to keep those separate. But just reiterating what I've just said there. The second option would be that, again, you have a standalone police station, but it would not be slab on grade. It would be similar to the first in that it would be 2 stories. The ground or the bottom floor would again be daylight garage space that could be used for cold storage or vehicle storage, parking. And in the future, when the fire station absolutely needs to be moved, then you would add on to the building and you would add that additional space anticipated in the first option, option A. So that's just to make sure it was clear what those 2 options represented. The assumptions in the financial analysis, we assumed that the budget and the expenses for 2018 were the baseline moving forward. That as we looked at costs for the police department, because they're inside City Hall, 1/3 of all of City Hall's costs would be attributed to them, plus their own cost would be attached to it. The options we looked at were, again, the status quo, if the departments remain where they are, and construct the space modifications as reasonably possible, or just building the police station on Birdseye or the combined facility on Birdseye. We looked at a 5-year window and a 10-year outlook, and the assumption was that whatever you do, we're looking at probably a new fire station in 7 years. If you build only a police station now, you're still going to have some cost in the near future. Under the status quo, the assumption was that you're at 7 years, you're going to have a new police station and fire station, and so you'd likely build a combined facility at that point. We went through and looked at all the costs for things like that have already been built into the budget or the capital improvement plans, as far as the roofs on the buildings, door openers, plumbing. They both have recording systems right now that they have to have licensed. They both have separate radios and antennas now. In the combined facilities, they could share those. General maintenance costs, of course, heating systems, space renovation costs. Under the scenario of not building anything, they're still going to need to renovate their space to accommodate what they have and what they need. Of course, you have the utilities cost, and so you have water, sewer. These numbers were provided more from Port City based on a recent construction that they have seen and were a part of down state. We did identify that their power costs, they were using Central Maine Power numbers instead of Emera, and so we were able to catch that and make some of those adjustments. There's in the end, we looked at O&M. If we were to try to keep them in their current facilities as long as we could, again, under the assumptions that were given, you'd be looking at over $1.7 million. A standalone police station, you'd be close to $2.1 million with the operation and maintenance. A combined facility, you'd be looking at $1.1 million for O&M. But when you look at the financing element of those, the combined facility Again, their price was $10.5 million for a combined facility versus a $5 million for a standalone. We have $1.1 million which are available for a fire station, which we can put into a combined facility, but we can't put into a standalone police station. We also know that there are grant funds that are available for fire stations, and it's been hard to find anything as far as grants for police stations. And so we've assumed that we could get at least $3 million in grants for the fire station. We know that some of the grants that we can go after would even be more than that, but we think we're conservative. We could get $3 million. The debt on those two loans are the principal, after you have the TIF and the grant money. So the principal you'd be looking at is 6.4 on the combined facility, but still $5 million for the standalone police. The annual debt payments on those would be $363,000 versus $465,000 between those two. As we've gone out and we've looked at potential bond rates, we've assumed a 30-year bond and an average of a 6% rate for those. In looking at the financing, you could probably get a smaller rate in the short term, but long term, those rates will be going up over 30 years. So total costs for the current facilities, you're looking at $1.7 million. Standalone 3.9, or a difference of an additional $2.1 million over 5 years. And so that would result in roughly $432,000 more a year, again, over 5 years from the status quo. The combined facility would be $3.4 million, or a difference of $1.7 million over the 5 years, for a difference of eating $335,000 annually in a 5-year window. When you look at a 10-year window, again, under the assumptions that in year 7, things change. Before I get to that, we also assumed that there was going to be some revenue potential with a combined facility, in that you'd be able to move the fire station out of that property and be able to put that back into the private hands. And so you'd be able to collect property taxes on that facility. That has been assessed at $800,000, assuming that it stays at that value, just for the building and the land, and assuming that the mill rate stays the same. You'd be looking at about $95,000 over 5 years. Now, we know that those things fluctuate, but as far as creating the estimate, that was some of the assumptions that we used. So your annual difference really doesn't change very much. Even with the revenue, you'd still be looking at about $316,000 of additional funds needed over using the current facilities. So in order to make up that $316,000, again, in a 5-year interval, you'd be looking at having to increase the mill rate. Or this is, again, assuming that we don't have any other properties that come online. There's no additional property value that increases in the city. Everything stays the same, but you'd be looking at needing to raise the mill rate so that you'd have additional $77 a year on each $100,000 of home value. So again, this is that 5-year interval. When you look at over a 10-year period of time, and the assumption being that you're going to have to build something new in roughly 7 years, the numbers they increase, but you see that there's still a similar comparison between the options. You have, under a standalone police, you'd have the cost of building the new police station, and then you'd have the cost of whatever you're going to be doing to the fire station. And so in that option, you'd essentially have 4 facilities: City Hall, fire, new police, or the fire until you build that one, and then whatever you have on the new site. And so over a 10-year period of time, you'd be looking closer to $4 million of O&M, whereas the combined facility, again, you don't have to take care of the fire after you build something new, and so you wouldn't have all of those costs. you'd be about 2.4 million. Under trying to stay in the current facilities around year 7, you'd have to build something new, and so you'd still would have additional cost with City Hall, the new site, and the fire EMS for estimated $3.2 million of O&M. Going through the same scenario as far as the debt, your current facilities, yes, you could stay in those up until year 7, again, the estimate, and then you're looking at a potential easily 40% increase of cost of construction for a new combined facility at year 7. And so your new construction cost could be close to almost $15 million for a combined facility at that point. Your TIF funds could be applied in that scenario as well as grant. And so your assumed principal would still be close to $11 million after that. Your annual debt payments would be $770,000 or so. Under the standalone police, again, at year 7, you're doing something with the fire department, and so you add that into you include that into future debt. So you'd be looking at $11.5 million of initial construction. And with the combined facility, you'd again still be looking at $10.5 million with some of the grants and other monies are available. Over 10 years, your annual difference from the status quo for a standalone police, you'd be roughly $210,000 a year over the 10 years. And with a combined facility, you'd be looking at about $152,000 a year difference over the 10 years. There would be some revenue potential in all 3 scenarios. Again, the assumption being that you're able to relocate the fire department in year 7. And so you'd be looking at the same option or same scenario. It stays $800,000 in value. You keep the mill rate the same. And so roughly $60,000 in taxable value under current facilities, option A, with a potential of $132,000 over 10 years of revenue. And so in the end, you're looking at an annual difference, once you take into account the potential revenue, of $144,000 each year for 10 years to make up the difference. And in order to do that, you'd basically be looking at still trying to recover that and looking at additional $35 per $100,000 in home value in those scenarios. The financing options we discussed briefly. Of course, we're going to try to go after every single grant that we can if the council directs us to do that. But it's only going to cover a portion of the cost. The city would have an option of going out to a general obligation bond through local institutions if you wanted to do that. Of course, the voters would determine that. We also could go out getting general obligation bonds through other government loan. You can get loans through USDA as well as grants. You can go through state funding. And that also would require local property tax increases to be approved by the voters. The most recent quote that we had through USDA was 5% over 30 years, slightly better terms than were built into the financial analysis. There's also the potential of a public-private partnership where a private company comes in, they essentially build the private building to suit our needs, and with a purchase option, and we lease the building from them. They, where we would own the property, they also would be leasing the property from us. It would have to, figure out how that all works in the contract, but essentially we would be leasing the building from them for the time until we decide to own the building outright. The council could raise the mill rate to cover that cost without a vote, meaning that you wouldn't be required to go to a vote. You could still put it out to vote if you wanted to, but the last one you wouldn't have to. looking at all of that, the majority of the committee voted to recommend that the city council approve moving forward with a combined facility on the Bird's Eye property in order to seek the grants and prepare a funding package for the voter consideration in 2019. The assumption being that we work to get it on the ballot 2019. If the voters approve it, then it goes out to bid for design, and you'd be designing through the winter 2019-2020. If the design could be done soon enough, you might be able to put it out to bid early 2020. The assumption is it might be closer to 2021 before you could even break ground, depending on the bidding market that you're in, the climate that we have, and how that goes. But that was the recommendation of the committee last week. The resolution that's on your agenda tonight does not approve moving forward with construction of a new public safety facility. It does, though, provide the weight of the council as far as a supporting of the same recommendation from the advisory committee that we'd be able to then take out to different funding partners and say, this is what the council wants to do, would like to do, and here's the resolution that says they're behind it. As was mentioned tonight, there's been a request for you to consider to delay approving that resolution until the new council sits in 3 weeks. That's up to you as a council what you'd like to do with that. But if you've got any questions, I can try to answer them.
Would a 3-week delay affect much?
Probably not, because we're going to be putting in a lot of federal grant applications, and most of the federal departments are generally closed at the end of December.
Mr. McDonough, how would you feel about your vote being taken away?
I'm gonna vote no, so that takes their problem off the table. But I don't like that either. Okay?
Okay, so what is it that you would want? You want to take this up now?
Excuse me?
You want to take this up now? Or January? No difference to you?
No difference to me.
Does anybody on the council have a preference?
I'm fine with waiting until January. It gives us a little more time to look at the information again and process it.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
There a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Oh, yeah, on the combined facility, I'll go back to the question I asked back in January. What's the plan for the old fire station? Was the assumption just somebody will buy it? Or was there something actually looked like marketing it, looking at who buys old fire stations? Or was it just somebody will buy it?
We haven't put it out to the market, obviously, but going through this process, we have been contacted by a couple of companies that are interested in it. There's been no discussion as far as, specifically with me, as far as the terms of sale or even an offer, but we know that there is interest in the facilities.
How would it change your calculus if you assumed in the 5-year scenario it doesn't sell, so there's no income, and then in the 10-year scenario, say after year 5, the city has to demolish it and then only sell it for the land value?
We can look at that scenario if the council would like me to do that.
Just saying, let's not assume it's going to be sold, right? Let's assume it doesn't.
I think what you would find, you can see as far as the numbers difference, if you take out $132,000 over 10 years.
But you're going to add in a demo cost.
Right, so we can look at those. If you want us to do that, we can bring that back for you.
Any other discussion? Yes?
My issue with the process has been the engineering firm out of Portland, somewhere.
Okay.
I'd like to see an option, currently the police, I'm a firm believer that we have to do something with the police station. We currently have 3,000 square feet. I understand it, the plan calls for 9,000 square feet for the police station.
I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head.
Okay, well, that's how I'm kind of remembering it, and apologize if I'm wrong, but I guess I'd like to see what a 6,000 square foot on a slab standalone police station would cost versus the first and second floor design that they had. But more important, I'd like it to go to a local engineering company from Aroostook County. I'd like a local engineering company whose employees are paying taxes in Aroostook County, who are sending their kids to school in Aroostook County, and the kind of engineers that you run into when you go grocery shopping. Sit down with our department heads and see what it would cost to just build a standalone police station on a slab. And I'm sure there's other options also that other councilors might want to look at. So I'm very much in favor of postponing this total look. When I buy a car, I go to more than one car dealer. I like to talk to more than one engineer. And I'd like to talk to a local engineer. I'd have more confidence in it.
Maybe I can clarify. The work that Port City has done was under contract only through this concept stage. So here moving forward, I've anticipated that we would be putting it out to bid for engineering services on any design that's done. So.
Okay, but there's assumptions that have been made by this engineering firm that I am questioning, that I probably wouldn't question if it was done by a local engineer who lives and breathes here with us all. That's my point. And there are a lot of assumptions placed in here.
And so what we'd be looking at is not only can they engineer it, but what is their experience with public safety facilities? Are they very familiar with all the laws, the rules, the internal spaces that would be associated with a new police station? We'd have to look at all of that in the selection process. But certainly we anticipate that it would go out to a bidding process and see who's
There are
interested.
engineering companies here that do it in Aroostook County.
And so they would have that opportunity to put in for the work.
Thank you.
Anything else? We have a motion and a second to postpone till, you want to do January 2nd, the first day? Okay.
That's more your administrative business meeting. We could do it
That's the first regular meeting,
the
second
what was that?
Tuesday.
14th. So we could have it on that agenda if you'd like.
14th. Motion is to
Table until the 14th.
till the 14th. All those in favor? Opposed? So you wanted to vote on it? All right, it's been tabled.
Kind of sort of like said that.
You want a special meeting for the end of the year?
Not unless we have to.
All right. Item D, discussion and possible action regarding River Road reconstruction design services.
Mayor and Council, you asked us to meet with Dubois and King and go over a revised scope of work for their being able to do the design for the construction or reconstruction of the River Road. It's been in your packet tonight for review, and Mr. Shane McDougall's here tonight to address any questions that you might have. When the packet was put together, we did not have a final cost estimate from them for all of that work, but we did know that for the work to progress at all, they anticipate needing to go out and do some additional survey work, and that was estimated between $6,000 and $8,000. Maybe Mr. McDougall can give us an update as far as the pricing and what's happening that way.
Yeah, I guess I don't have much of an update. We're still working through those internal QA QC process on our scope and fees. But to go back to the original proposal that we had when this project first came out, I don't see why we're very far off from that proposal. We had article or tasks A through I. There's a couple of those that we've already completed. There's also a couple that we don't necessarily need now based on that alternative. So, we can pare that down, and we should have something more formal at the next council meeting in January if that's the case. But I think the biggest thing is before then, we'd like to get out there before we get too much more snow to do some survey work to really define that slope.
And this is primarily to check the whole road for possible bad places, all right? Well, not necessarily the whole road, but...
Well, this is to give better definition for that failed slope. Not necessarily the whole road, but that failed slope, that 800 to 1,000 feet. When we did our survey before, we just did a day, very preliminary, get the general slope and lay of the land so that we could put together an analysis and cost estimates.
What about checking other places that could fail?
Yeah, that'll be part of the additional, the bigger package, so to
You
speak.
don't need the survey to do that?
I guess for our scope of services to do that, no. I guess I was under this understanding that was just going to be more of an analysis of a preliminary analysis of those failed.
Well, I think our concern, or mine anyway, is that if we're going to be fixing the road, we should be looking for places that this could happen to and then fix the drainage there so it doesn't happen. That's what I thought I was talking about.
Yep, and I think conceptually we could do that, and we could probably get that to 50, 70%. The problem I see with that is with the weather conditions where they are, it's hard to say, okay, that ditch is failed or that culvert's failed because we got 3 feet of snow over it. Whereas the initial site, we've already seen that. We've seen it without snow. We know that a little better, I should say. So,
Mayor, if I might, I think the big concern is we need to still address the issue that we know is there, and the assessment of other areas. We know what needs to be done, but the one that's right in front of our face is still the failed portion of the road, and that's the work that I think we need to stay focused on for the time being.
My concern is if we're going to spend $1 million per 1,000 feet, how many thousand feet are in jeopardy? That's where I'm coming from.
I just want to make sure from our perspective, we don't say, yep, we have another 1,000 feet here, another 1,200 feet here, another culvert here, with the information that we can gather at this point in time. Now, if we need to, come springtime to further define that, we can absolutely do that. But I think from my perspective, I think we can give some overall general assumptions on some of those other areas that, hey, yes, this 1,000 feet needs to be fixed. Here's some recommendations. But I don't think, from my perspective, we were going to include that in this engineering package. This would be specific for that 800 to 1,000 foot section.
Okay. Any questions?
Shane, where's your boundaries for the 800 to 1,000 feet? Is it like from the farm entrance down to below Diane's?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Where but you are taking a look, going a little further than the farm entrance, or have you looked?
Yeah, we have, and I think that's within that scope. Yep.
So the question I have is more administrative. So, as I understand it, this design portion was kind of captured in those 4 scenarios. Whatever you thought it might be for each one, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So based on our discussion last time, I just want to make sure if we decide, okay, this is what we're gonna pay them moving forward. What if we get to next spring and the council in the spring says, well, we want to wait. So they've got it designed, they've got kind of a shovel-ready project. But then at that point, the council says, well, let's wait another year. Well, at that point, I assume they're gonna want to get paid. Whereas I think we're assuming right now that that's gonna get baked into that bond, right? So should we discuss how that will work if we decide hey, we want to wait another year or two or whatever, because they're going to want to get paid sometime in the spring when that's done. That's just throwing that out there. Maybe we should figure that out.
I guess there's always the what ifs. There's the the crystal balls. There's the direction the council had was let's move forward with scenario 2, which was to move the road as much as we could, and so that was why we went back and met with Shane to discuss that revised scope. If they at this point just move forward with the survey work, then that at least the next council in a couple of months or a month could say we think we want to hold off and do that. You're not approving the whole scope tonight because that's definitely not my recommendation. We don't have the total budget estimate for that.
Okay, so the recommendation is just for this additional. Okay.
Just the survey work tonight. Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah, you had my heart going there
No.
for a minute. That's what I, okay.
That's how I interpreted that. So, okay.
Sorry, no, just the survey work tonight is what I would recommend to be approved, so they can move forward with that. And they can be working on additional design after the rest of the scope is approved by the council.
Any other? Yes, sir.
You're gonna go out and do approximately $6,000 to $8,000 and more survey work. That doesn't preclude eliminating any of the other options. Well, we were options 1 and 2. That wouldn't. This work alone is not designated to just one option.
No.
That work you're gonna do could be used to revisit option 1.
Yeah, the work is, again, going to really clearly define that failed slope. When we brought a survey crew here for one day, we cut like 3 or 4 lines down that bank. We're going to try to cut 12 or more lines down that bank to really get how that lays. So that won't affect, no.
I can support doing another 6,000 or 8,000 to finalize your work and your engineering of that 800-foot section.
Have a motion?
Well, after discussion, I'll make it a motion.
Second.
Oh, then I made it.
It's your first one. Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? 4 to 5 to 1. Okay, discussion and possible action regarding River Road reconstruction financing. Is that a little early for that, or?
We can treat this more as informational, or if you want to, you can treat it as an action item. But we went out, we did talk to the Municipal Bond Bank as well as some of the other local financial institutions, and we asked them, could they give us some numbers, some general terms for what a 10-year bond would cost on a $1.4 million note. And the only one that gave us something in writing, so to speak, was the Municipal Bond Bank. And that information is provided in your packet. The other financial institutions were only willing to give us a verbal over the phone. They first wanted to see a lot more details and how it was going to be secured and all of these things. I think the Municipal Bond Bank, they're more familiar with how the government process works and the options that we have to secure those bonds. Let me jump down in the packet to that information so that the public would have it.
Are we on? TV?
Yes.
It's been fixed. Can the public see that screen? Is that how it's set up?
No.
It's possible to do that. Might be something to look into. Like when you were going through all those options the committee did.
So the Municipal Bond Bank, basically what they would lay out is, and again, we assumed $1.4 million since that was the assumption, I guess, was that even with the $1.2 million option that you said you wanted to look into, there's always going to be cost things to consider, and going with the 1.4 gives us a 15% buffer on that $1.2 million. So if you went for a $1.4 million bond note through the bond bank, if you executed that in 2019. The way they would have it set up is you'd only pay interest in 2019. You wouldn't pay a full payment of principal and interest until 2020. And so the payment next year would only be $18,000. Now keep in mind the budget that's on the agenda for later discussion, it assumes that we make a $150,000 payment next year. Then after that, you'd have payments not to exceed $158,000 a year after that. The first rate in 2020 would be 2.2%, and then you can see it would escalate until, nearly a 3% interest rate in 2029. Total amount paid would be $1.6 million. Total interest paid $228,000 over a 10-year bond.
Again, what about Public Works? Let's say Public Works, there's $200,000 or $300,000 worth of on that project. That would reduce that.
Certainly. And
that's still the plan, right?
We will have to get through the design phase of this, and when it goes to bidding of the work, that's when we put it out to bid. We'd have to say, this is the work that Public Works is going to do, this is the work that the contractor is going to do. We'd have to have a better idea of what's going to be the city work versus the private work in order to finalize any bond that we go into. So this is very early. Definitely we're not asking you to approve going out and getting this bond right now. And so you can definitely treat this as an FYI, but just so you know, this is some of the numbers that you might be looking at with a $1.4 million project.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are those locked in interest rates?
Nothing's locked right now. We haven't signed anything.
No, okay. If we were to sign this agreement, are those locked in interest rates?
Those are rates for the fall bond. It was too early to get rates for the spring bond.
Okay, but if we were to sign something in the year 2029, we'd be paying 2.99. They don't have the option of raising it during the years.
The only thing is these are the fall 2018 rates, which could change in the spring.
Anything else?
I did get confirmation from local banks in writing, and they were all over 4%. But
Same thing?
yeah, but then I didn't get it in time for the packet.
Okay. All right. Item F, discussion and possible action regarding 2019 expense and capital improvement budget.
I'm not sure how you want to go through all of that, Mayor. I just maybe to skip down to the summary page for this.
We've been through it several times. It's on the website also.
It's in the, right. So what you're looking at right now is an estimated 2.97% increase over last year's general expenses, or a total of $10,002,814. Revenues next year are projected to be $10,357,000 or $10,357,350. But that does include a one-time revenue source from Acoustic Waste Solutions of $615,000, which was a payment being made to Caribou through the merger of Tri-Community Landfill with the Presque Isle Landfill. So if you've got questions or comments about specific line items, I'm happy to go through those, and we can do what you like, Mayor.
Questions?
Mr. McDonough?
Ambulance bills?
Yes.
A couple of years or so, we thought maybe that a good place for them would be under the finance department. I still think that they should be under the finance department. I also think that they should move into 25 High Street. I just can't see why we got them separated when they should be all under one roof.
They, for right now, for budget, for as far as the cost estimates and the lines that they come out of, they're moving into the fire. But as far as a supervisory responsibility, they are staying in the finance department.
Everything's under finance. So that's the way we looked at it when we did it before, and that's the way it should have happened, and that was another one of those that didn't happen fully. Okay? So
In the 2018 budget, they are fully under the finance department.
right, but they didn't move. That was before you.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So that's one thing I have. And then earlier I questioned the retainer for code enforcement. Is that just for plumbing only?
Plumbing and commercial inspections.
Why aren't any of the people that we have qualified as code enforcement within the administration qualified to do that?
They have their certificates, but they're also primarily assessors, and that's where their focus has been. And there hasn't been, I guess you might say, the comfort level of being able to say yes, even though we have it, it's been on the shelf, and having to dust that off a little bit would take a little bit more than just having Mr. Wentworth work with them on the commercial inspections.
We got 3 people working in code enforcement.
We have 2 of those 3 have their certificates.
They have their certificates, so they're qualified code enforcement. Building inspectors, the whole works.
Yes.
Okay. I don't believe that we've appointed either one of them as a code enforcement officer, correct?
They've been appointed as a chief building official and deputy building official.
Okay. And Mr. Murchison is code enforcement?
Yes.
So I, like Mr. Martin, think that we should have enough people here that are qualified in code enforcement to work with contractors and the inspection people that they have there, to where we don't have to subcontract somebody. We're paying 3 people salaries or to do that, and then we're still farming it out. And that's my only other thing that I have.
I guess my only concern with that is that we also have the issue of we have a full-time assessor that's supposed to be doing the assessing of the city and focusing on the quarterly reviews of the properties, and pulling them off of that responsibility, even with the other staff that they have, it creates where we run into the situation of them not being able to do all of the assessing work that they need to do. And so,
Okay, then before you, we only had 1 code enforcement officer, all right, doing all that, plus housing. So now we got 3 people in one form or another that are capable of doing inspections. Okay, so I don't think that argument holds water with me, especially, you know. So I'm just saying, you know, why do we have people on staff qualified to do inspections and we're farming it out? That's all. I understand the plumbing and I understand the electricity. I don't have a problem with that. So that's all.
Anyone else?
I got a few. On the capital plan, there's a bunch of different line items that say use of current reserves. Are those separate accounts? Are they different accounts?
they are separate accounts.
And they're all designated for that particular purpose, that they all kind of net out?
Yes.
Do we know what the balances are after, or are they 0?
Most of these will not be 0, but close. If there's some specific ones that you want to look at, I could share that with you.
No, that's all right. Okay, so what we have right now in here is a one-time shot in the arm from Tri-Community for $615 that really kind of closes the gap, right?
Right.
And then the other question I have on the loader for the Public Works, was a life cycle cost analysis done between new versus used?
I believe that's what Dave went through. He's not here tonight to answer that, but
Okay.
this is going on year 20 of the loader.
No, I know. It's not new versus, keep the 20-year-old when it's new versus, you know,
A used one.
they use, you know, say 2,000 hours or 1,000 hours.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not taking the big hit of depreciation that we can't write that off, right?
It's a good question. I know that our Public Works Director, Mr. Willett, has been very mindful of trying to find equipment through the DRMO program, and I know they scan that quite regularly. If something came up, I'm sure they would, if it was in working condition, they would go after it.
I don't mean DRMO, just, you know, there's hundreds of places you can buy used heavy equipment that's in good shape, can be serviced locally. Why that's not being considered?
I wouldn't say that it hasn't, or it's not being considered. It's something that we can definitely look at still.
I'd like to see the life cycle cost, just so we can all understand what that difference is. That's all I got.
Related, not related, I'm not sure if this is the right place, but I know the sidewalk thing is something I've talked to you about a few times as well, and it was brought up today. Is that something that the budget is going to be able to support with the increased snow and things of that nature for the safety? And I'm not just talking like the main ways. I brought forward parents from Glen Street. We have kids that have to go on it to go to the rec. We have kids that have to go on it from school to school, and if it's not done, there's kids walking in the road and there's a lot of traffic.
You did bring that up with me. My conversation that I had with Mr. Roulette was that past councils, he didn't say how far past, had basically directed him to not pay overtime to the crews for clearing of the sidewalks. And under that assumption, if the crews are getting to their 40 hours, they'll be in the trucks clearing the snow off the roads, but he's not going to send anybody out to actually clear off the sidewalks if they're already getting overtime. And
I haven't heard that, and I've been here 10 years.
I've heard the past 2 years from Public Works directly.
What we've done, as I recall, what we've done, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ago was, if there are sidewalks on both sides of the street, just do one side.
So,
And that's pretty much the only conditions.
well, Glen Street specifically, I can tell you that when it is cleared, it is only cleared to Sperry, and there's a sidewalk on the other side of the road that is not cleared. And there's a lot of kids there. I drive that road every day, and there are a lot of kids, and I've seen a lot of negative publicity on Facebook and other things. I've been trying to, take it down a little, but, people are concerned about their kids especially.
sure.
I would think that the sidewalks to the schools should be done, because the kids are going to school. Other places, well, they can stay home if they want to, or whatever, but, yeah, I don't see it myself paying over. We need to pay overtime to clean sidewalks to the schools. I personally don't have a problem with
I think that they,
Just to,
No, I'm fully aware of the sidewalk on one side or the other and so on and so forth, and, I think what they look at their priorities is getting the main streets and stuff like that cleaned up and then going and taking care of the secondary stuff. And traversing the school is important, but we provide busing also. I know you only live up the street.
I know, my kid almost
And
hit
there
my
is
car.
there is a provision in the ordinance that in the future, if we were to not be cleaning the sidewalks, that the abutting property owners would be responsible. So there's that option out there also.
This is your last meeting, isn't it?
Right.
Well, I mean, if you don't know those things,
I know.
okay,
Can I just say something to that?
yes, you may.
Public Works budget's $2 million.
I know how much the budget is.
That's a lot of money.
I
to
didn't say we were there, I just said
No.
that option is there, okay? So I'm just putting it out there.
I think one of the indications from Dave was that one of the reasons why they were also skimping on that a little bit was not having the staff.
Yeah.
But the budget right now anticipates a fully staffed department, and he indicated that it shouldn't be an issue as long as they can keep all the staff there. And I've talked with him about making it a priority around the school to make sure that sidewalk's open. But it is in the budget
What I
to
was
make
gonna
sure
say,
that
too,
they can
was
do
the
that.
staffing. He said he's down, what, 3? So
Well, he was up until a couple of weeks ago. Right now, he's got all the staff in place.
didn't have enough staff to, so
Right.
the sidewalks were gonna be the lower priority.
Another thing is, the guys go clean the sidewalk, and then every homeowner cleans their driveway and plugs the sidewalk. I think if you're gonna plug the sidewalk, you go out and shovel it out when you're done plowing your yard.
That's fair.
I mean, you see a lot from the high school down. You hear that, Mr. Chief? You ready for this? No, I mean, seriously. I mean, you're going down the sidewalk and then there's 2 feet of snow. You gotta climb over it to continue.
I think the chief just asked for a snowmobile in the budget.
And your other thing,
That's my concern.
Mr. Vaughn?
I wanted to go back to the main page where we show the $615,000 of one-time money coming in. I guess it was some, Okay, the one, right there. That's one-time money that's coming in because of Prescal coming, joining Tri-King landfill, and they're buying in. My philosophy tells me not to use one-time money for operational expenses. We want to take one-time money and apply it against debt, and we've had discussions on that. I'm for that. If you want to take one-time money and pay for a project, I can go for that too. I gotta think of what the project, well, let's just say to help fix the river road, if it's so deemed possible. We know we have to fix it, you take the one-time money and apply it there. By putting $615,000 where you have it, all they're basically doing is kicking the can down the road, in my opinion, on our expense side of this sheet. If I take the $615,000 out, under my philosophy, we're projecting that we're going to spend, give or take, approximately $250,000 more than what we're going to take in.
Sounds about right.
I know we have unexpended, what do you call them?
Allocations.
Allocations out there. That's a debatable subject on who owns those money. But let's just say you put it in there. Because it's been a tradition. You can make up for it that way.
We have roughly, well, according to the audit, $392,000 from 2017 of unexpended allocations.
But it still doesn't take away from my primary issue that I have as a counselor. We're showing that we're spending more money than we're projecting to take in. I understand that every family tries to live by this code, but every family once in a while has to use a credit card. I tried that, and it personally didn't work out too well for me. So I've learned to try to live with to spend with what I make that year.
Do we have any one-time costs in this budget? We must have.
Other than
No, not one-time revenues. one-time expenses. Do we have one-time, we must have one-time expenses in this budget?
Well, it would be in your capital areas, as far as what you want to spend money on in your capital. So your $150,000 toward the River Road, as far as that debt payment, that 1.4 million. If you wanted to, in a sense, pay down that bond as low as you can before you went into debt, that could be a one-time expense if you wanted to. Or the boiler system that we have, we still have roughly $780,000 of payments left on the boiler system. And so right now, we're just allocating our annual payment toward that. But if you wanted to pay all that down as much as possible with one-time funds, you could do that as well.
And I have no problem in allocating those funds for such a thing. Because then it does really free up the budget on an annual basis for 6 or 7 years out. In a sustainable way,
Yeah.
it drops it. Instead of taking the one great big, look what we did, we reduced the mill rate. But wait a minute, that's just one-time money. We're not going to get it.
Right.
We are getting 400,000 next year, right?
It'll be half of that, so $300,000 for the next 2 years after that.
In 2019, you're going to get 615, correct?
Right.
And then 2020 and 2021, you're going to get
Roughly $300,000 each year.
each year. Okay, all right. So, can I steal a little bit of your thunder?
Go ahead.
Go back to the unexpended balance. Why don't we use some of that to put into the expense account? And then I would make a recommendation that we use some of that to establish a reserve line for the tax benefit program. Maybe not 70, but 50 of it. And then that way we're not raising taxes. Is it
So the
322,000 there you said, or 392?
392.
392? I would recommend 250,000 towards the budget and 50,000 towards the tax benefit program.
From where?
From the unexpended funds. No, not that.
Oh.
What we carried over last year.
Okay. Tonight's issue is the expense budget.
Correct.
The income budget, what you just, I believe is what you're saying right now, is an income subject.
That's money we carried over from last year.
But we will address it at the next, in June.
You can do that now if you want.
Okay. Kind
So-
of complicated it, but.
So right now, like I said, we're at 2.97% of last year's budget, not adding the
Right.
tax credit program, not adding an additional $250,000 of one-time expenses toward a payment or something like that. If you wanted to add those into the budget, then when we set the mill rate, we would show that we're going to be using some of our own one-time unexpended allocations toward offsetting the need for those additional revenues.
I get on these long-winded speeches, and I apologize, Mayor, but this is the reason we run for city council, is the budget, and I think we've lacked this past year in addressing both, not only the income side of our city, but the expense side of our city, but we also need to look at our income of our city. And this goes to the core of what I'm saying about we're spending more than what we take in. It is a marked improvement over what I saw last year. We're not using one, it's better. Let's just put it that way. So it shows a trend in the right direction. I ran for city council as a zero-based budgeting type person. I ran for city council not because I believed in the standard way of doing things. I ran because I wanted to do it in a different format. This budget is doing things like we've done them for the last 30 years. hoping for a more zero-based budgeting style of analysis of the budget. You cannot support something that shows that we're spending more than we're taking in without a long-term understanding of it. That we could at least change the way we go about processing this document. Thank you.
Anything else? What are the wishes of the council?
I make the motion that we pass the budget with the reductions that I recommended from the undesignated fund.
Which was, put that money in towards the...
$250,000 towards the expense budget and $50,000 for your tax benefit program when you get that up and running. And then that still leaves a little bit of...
I agree with that. I'll second that.
Does that allow us to?
That's not, that's
down
revenue that comes into play after the first of the year.
Any other discussion? Yes?
Well, the issue I brought up, I mean, that's a huge ticket item. I mean, if that can be reduced,
It's $210,000 in the capital. If we can buy a loader for $180,000 or $150,000, you know, we're going to try to do what we can to keep the cost down. But
so if you put 210 in, and you end up spending 150, that 60 ends up in this overlay 2 years later.
it stays in that equipment fund that we can now put toward other purchases in the future that the council would have to review, such as the 15-foot bat wing that he said he would really like to have, but he's waiting till next year to request that.
Anything else?
And I guess I'm happy to sit down and go through. I've got a different spreadsheet that shows the fund balances with the anticipated expenses and looking out long term what needs to happen with those fund balances versus the expenses and the allocations over those years. So you'll see it's going to ebb and flow a little bit, and sometimes you're going to have a little bit left in those reserves at the end of the year because you're looking long term at needing to have additional money for those other capitals.
Set. We have a motion and a second. His motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Passes 4-2. Remember, that's the most we can spend. Hopefully we will spend less than that. Do we have an executive session today?
I have one thing, but it doesn't have to be an executive session.
Okay. Other business. Mayor? Manager?
I'm not sure which side of the table we're sitting on. Just a quick update for the council. I received notice today that the fire department has changed representation. They are no longer with the Teamsters Local Union number 340. They are now with the International Association of Firefighters. And I anticipate that they will be contacting us very shortly to look at their contract, which expires December 31st of this year. So we'll be having some more discussion, I'm sure, about that one soon.
Okay. Any other business from the council? Next meeting will be January 2nd. Which is on a Wednesday.
Yes.
Thank you for coming.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Have a good one. I'll take this if I got to come back.